Imagine a boy who, at 3 years old, is already learning Greek. By 8, he's devoured Plato and arithmetic. He's teaching his younger siblings, debating ideas he barely has the words for, living in a world dominated by study and intellectual rigour. Now imagine that same boy, at 14, attending advanced mathematics courses in Montpellier, learning logic, chemistry, political economy, and meeting great thinkers like John Baptiste Say and Henry St. Simon. That boy was John Stuart Mill, born in 1806 in London, a mind so brilliant, disciplined and curious that it almost broke him. By 20, the weight of knowledge and expectation led to a nervous breakdown, and yet it was romantic poetry, the music of the human heart, that began to heal him. By the end of this episode, you'll see how Mill's extraordinary intellect, radical ideas and profound humanity shaped philosophy, economics, politics, feminism, and even our understanding of freedom itself. John Stuart Mill's upbringing was anything but ordinary. His father, James Mill, a devoted disciple of Jeremy Bentham's Utilitarianism, designed a rigorous intellectual curriculum for his son, envisioning him as the ultimate heir to the utilitarian project. Play, friends, childhood games, almost non-existent. Instead, his days were filled with study, debate and adult conversation. Mill's early exposure to the giants of Greek thought, history and mathematics shaped a mind that, while brilliant, was stretched to its limits. And stretched it was. By 20, the brilliance, discipline and immense pressure led to that nervous breakdown, as I said, a profound inner collapse. The lesson Mill learned was subtle but transformative. The pursuit of reason and knowledge must never ignore the human heart. Even a man devoted to reason could not survive without the richness of emotion and art. Mill's philosophy was rooted in empiricism. He argued fiercely that all knowledge, human knowledge, mathematics, logic, science, and even moral principles comes from experience, from observation, from the world as we perceive it. There are no innate ideas, no moral precepts waiting to be discovered in the soul. Everything is learned, understood, and generalized from sensory experience. In 1843, Mill published his monumental System of Logic, a work that was not just about logic, but about the very methods of science and how they could be applied to society as well as nature. Mill distinguished between formal logic, the logic of consistency, and what he called the logic of proof, a method of demonstrating how evidence supports conclusions. This framework allowed Mill to analyse causation and develop a systematic account of inductive reasoning, which remains central to modern discussions of logic. Mill was also a critic of intuition. The idea that explanations could rely on intuitively compelling principles. He considers thinkers like William Whewell and Sir William Hamilton guilty of bad philosophy. For Mill, knowledge had to be tested, observed, reasoned from experience and evidence, not assumed from a sense of what should be true. Mill's ambition was not confined to philosophy. He turned his empirical approach to the study of society, politics and economics. In Principles of Political Economy in 1848, he sought to prove that economics was far from the dismal science critics like Thomas Carlyle claimed. Here Mill reaffirmed classical economic theories, free markets, minimal governmental intervention, comparative advantage, opportunity cost and economies of scale. Yet he also went further. Radical for his time, Mill argued that society should sometimes sacrifice economic growth for environmental sustainability. Population should be managed not just to prevent starvation, but to allow humans room to breathe and flourish. He even envisaged an economy where worker-owned cooperatives could operate, an idea that bridged efficiency and humanity. Imagine this, a man living in the Victorian era, advocating environmental preservation, fairer economic structures, and shared prosperity, while still understanding the fundamental efficiency of classical economic principles. That was John Stuart Mill, a thinker unafraid to combine logic, morality, and imagination. In ethics, Mill transformed utilitarianism. Bentham had emphasised quantity, the greatest happiness for the greatest number. Mill introduced quality. Intellectual and moral pleasures, he argued, outweigh physical pleasures. He famously said that he would rather be a dissatisfied human than a satisfied pig. Mill's utilitarianism was humane, subjective, and socially conscious. Altruism became as important as self-interest. Happiness was not just to be measured, it was to be understood, cultivated and enriched by moral and intellectual growth. Then came perhaps his most famous work, On Liberty, 1859. Here Mill asked, what limits should society place on individual freedom? His answer, the harm principle. Society may only coerce individuals to prevent harm to others. Self-regarding actions, decisions that only affect the actor, must remain free, even if others view them as harmful or foolish. Freedom of thought, expression, religion, these were non-negotiable. Mill also warned of the tyranny of the majority, where popular opinion can oppress minorities as much as any authoritarian ruler can. In advocating free speech and social liberty, Mill made a profound case for intellectual and social progress. No opinion should be silenced, for within every dissent might lie truth. His reflections resonate today in debates over censorship, political correctness, and democratic governance. Mill also made groundbreaking contributions to epistemology. In his examination of Sir William Hamilton's philosophy, 1865, he presented Phenomenalism, the idea that sensations are the basic building blocks of reality. Matter, he wrote, may be defined as the permanent possibility of sensation. Mill traced the external world to the possibilities of human experience, a view that shaped scientific philosophy until the rise of physicalism in the 20th century. And then there was feminism. In The Subjection of Women, 1869, Mill argued that freedom should be universal. If liberty is good for men, it must be good for women. He challenged claims about supposed natural differences, urging that the only way to discover women's true capabilities is by giving them equal access to opportunity, education and experimentation. Mill saw the oppression of women as a relic of the past and a barrier to human progress, and he confronted it with the same rational, evidence-driven approach he applied to logic, economics and social reform. And Mill's reflections on religion were no less bold. 3 essays on religion, published after his death, offered calm, rational critique of traditional religious views. He argued that belief in an omnipotent, benevolent God should encourage, or could encourage, intellectual laziness, but left room for the possibility of a less omnipotent, benevolent force shaping the world. Mill advocated what he called a religion of humanity, where moral and intellectual development guide our understanding of the universe rather than unquestioned dogma. Rational inquiry, he believed, should govern not only science but ethics and belief. Throughout his life, Mill tried to persuade the British public to adopt a scientific approach to understanding social, political and economic change, but he never abandoned the insights of poets, writers and imaginative thinkers. He was a man of both reason and heart, logic and beauty, science and art. His work reminds us that true wisdom does not separate the analytical from the human. Imagine stepping into Mill's world, a life of extraordinary intellectual rigour, of relentless inquiry, of moral and social concern, and of deep respect for human imagination and emotion. It is a life that asks of us not just to think, but to feel, to question, and to care. John Stuart Mill was more than a philosopher. He was a pioneer of freedom, a visionary of social justice, a defender of women, a moral innovator, an economist who foresaw environmental responsibility, and a humanist who believed in the limitless potential of human reason and compassion. His life is a reminder that intellectual brilliance must walk hand in hand with ethical courage, and that freedom, happiness, and progress demand both thought and heart. Now for our sponsors. Strong Coffee Company. Protein-filled coffee at strongcoffeecompany.com. Use code VANCRUX1 for 20% off. And then we've got More Labs. Rehydration at its finest. Visit morelabs.com and use code VANCRUX1 for 25% off. And then finally, Liquor Gummies, liquure.com. Packed with electrolytes, vitamins and natural ingredients. Helps your body recover before your hangover hits. Use code VANCRUX1 for 20% off.